ever wondered how the quality of flour is influencing bread baking? Let's find out how to choose the right flour for the type of bread you want to bake. Bread is basically made from only three ingredients: flour, water, and salt. The flour has the biggest proportion in a loaf, and it is the most important ingredient as it provides structure to the dough. To better understand its importance, let's limit the discussion today only to the wheat flour. Although most of the wheat flours look very similar, the result after baking can be totally different. To understand why, let's go back to the basic question. What is flour? Flour comes from wheat berries. Wheat spikes hold the wheat berries. If you press a wheat spike with your fingers, you'll notice that the wheat berries are popping out from the spikelets. If you blow away the chaff, the grain remains. Each wheat berry has three parts. The endosperm is the biggest part and contains starch granules, iron, B vitamins. The bran is the outer layer that contains fibers, proteins, B vitamins, and trace minerals. And the germ is the smallest part and is the embryo of the seed, contains lipids, B vitamins, and minerals. Flour is obtained through the reduction of the wheat berries into smaller particles. Through simple milling, we obtain what it is called whole wheat or wholemeal flour that includes all the three elements of a wheat berry. To arrive to a white flour, the germ and the bran has to be removed through a sifting process. With them, fibers, vitamins, and minerals also go away. After milling, the white flour needs to age for at least a month in order to acquire good baking properties. Freshly milled flour, called green or immature flour, will produce dough with poor elasticity that will result in bread with poor volume, thick crust, and dense crumb texture. Through the aging process, the flour gets oxidized due to the exposure to oxygen, and its baking properties are improved. However, if you mill the flour at home, you can benefit from higher nutritional content and better flavor, even though the elasticity of the dough is reduced. When you choose a new flour, it is better that you look for certain characteristics. Unfortunately, not all of these details you can obtain by just looking at the label on the package, but understanding their importance can help you in the baking process. Even more, if you buy from a local farm, you might not have access to many of these details, and the only remaining option is to test the flour yourself. But generally, choosing organic flour has greater health benefits. The protein content is probably the most important aspect to consider when you choose the flour to bake bread. The higher the protein content of the flour, the higher performance of the bread. The percentage of protein content is usually marked on the package label. Based on the protein content, we can distinguish three categories of flour. Cake flour or pastry flour is usually the lowest in protein content because for cakes, gluten development is not a purpose. Then it comes all-purpose flour, who usually has a moderate protein content, and on top is the bread and pizza flour with the most protein percentage. In fact, there is no clear threshold between these three categories, and they may differ from producer to producer or from country to country. This means that you can easily find flour labeled as bread flour having 10% or 14% protein content. The best is to always look on the back of the package and spot the percentage of the protein content. The protein content is directly linked with gluten. When flour is mixed with water, the gluten is formed. Gluten's main function in baking bread is to strengthen your dough. Low protein content means weak gluten that results in a smaller volume of your dough due to the lack of structure. Gluten, through its main two components, gliadin and glutenin, provide extensibility and elasticity to the dough. To measure this, some of the flour producers indicate value like P, L, and W on the package. Let's quickly see what they mean. P is the resistance of the dough to deformation. L is the extensibility of the dough. A PL index indicates the behavior of the gluten, and W indicates the strength of the flour. The higher the W factor, the stronger the flour, so the better is for baking bread. The W index, although in direct relationship with the protein content, gives you more insights about the quality of the gluten. This means that the higher the W index, the more water absorbent the flour is. Also, the higher the protein content, the longer mixing time is needed to achieve dough consistency. The protein content is a characteristic of flour that the baker can play with. An experienced baker can produce a beautiful bread even from a low protein flour, applying advanced baking techniques. But using a basic method to two wheat flours may result in loaves that look drastically different. I give you a trick. If your flour lacks gluten, you may add commercial gluten to improve its baking properties. In the past, very white bread was associated with quality food, while darker bread was seen as food for poors. Ironically, from health perspective is exactly the opposite. Naturally, flour has a off-white color due to the presence of bran particles and the existence of carotenoid pigments. A bright white color of the flour is due to aging or bleaching. With time, the color of the flour fades away due to the exposure to oxygen. Aged flour also comes with consistency in making bread. Bleaching instead solved the problem of the flour millers who needed to store their flour for at least a month to age naturally, because proper storage cost money. The process consists in treating the flour with chemical agents, also called dough conditioners. Bleaching affects the color by making the flour whiter in just a few days. But bleaching does more than just affect the color. It affects the texture but by making it softer and finer. It affects the taste, making it slightly bitter. It affects the structure of proteins, creating an easier to handle dough, and it influences gluten development. So of course commercial bakers prefer a bleached flour as being more economical. Bleached flour works best for cakes, biscuits, cookies, pancakes, waffles, or quick breads. Moisture content is one of the characteristics rarely found on your package. If the moisture overpasses 16%, the flour is prone to naturally occurring organisms and may get an unpleasant taste or smell. Of course, the higher the moisture content, the less water you need for the bread. That's why the producers recommend storing your flour in a dry and aerated environment. This also means that the flour won't give you consistent results if you store it in a humid pantry, and you might need to add less water in your recipe due to a high moisture content in the flour. The ash content refers to the mineral or inorganic material in the flour and indicates the purity of flour. It gives the degree of contamination of flour with bran and germ. In France, the ash content classifies the flours. A pure flour T55 comes from 0.55 ash content, while T150, its 1.5%, is corresponding to whole wheat flour. In Italy, 00 is the most pure flour and 2 is the whole wheat flour. The more pure the flour, the less ash content indicator. While a more pure flour has great baking characteristics, one with more ash content has more minerals, so it is more healthy. The more ash content, the more water you will need to add in the dough. The higher the protein content, the higher water absorption of the flour. Adding gluten to the formula needs to come with increased quantity of water. The lower the moisture content, the higher water absorption. A coarse flour will require less water as it has less damaged starch during the milling process. There are many indicators that producers may assess in the lab, but for a home baker they are either inaccessible or more difficult to handle. What you need to understand is that even if you apply the exact same recipe and method from a book or from the web, the quality of the flour can be a big game changer. In the end, when you choose a flour for bread baking, ask yourself the following. First, for what purpose will you use the flour? If it is for artisan bread, pick a strong one with high W index or with high protein content. Second, what kind of breadcrumb are you targeting? A very well raised loaf with an open crumb? Then go for a higher protein content. But for a denser bread, medium strength flour may go as well. Third, is the health aspect the main purpose for the bake? Then choose an organic whole wheat flour that contains also minerals and vitamins from the bran and germ. You may also want to consider milling your own flour for an extra flavor, minerals, or vitamins.